to Russ Hooper. Mr. Russ Hooper, would you join us on stage? No, you don't. For those of you who have never met Russ Hooper, count your blessings. Who else do we need? Oh, we need Larry Moss. Larry, would you please join us? Yes, sir. Absolutely. Don Doggett.
The whole crowd's coming.
Yeah, you're going to be sorry. I'll tell you that right now. Who else do we need? Dave Williams? Just drag up a seat. Just drag up a seat. Russ, you can have a seat.
Yes, sir. I'm going to need. You want them?
No, that's yours. You don't need two of them.
Yeah. You're fine. Stay right there. We're not going to hurt you. Russ promised Janice that this would be a banner night. Slide up to me. Have a seat. Make yourself at home. Mike, you're up. Mr. Mike Esposito has things he wants to
say a
say.
couple little things about Russ. Well, I'm very proud to be a friend of Russ Hooper. He has set a fine example for others to follow. Not only as a reso player, but as a person. Russ is always humble, honest, amiable, and very funny. He is a true pioneer of the Dobro. He has played on hundreds of recordings and was involved in the golden years of bluegrass. And he's influenced countless people, including Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead, which is unbelievable. If you ever read the story in the Jerry Garcia biography, him and David Grisman drove from California to Sunset Park in Pennsylvania to see the band that Russ Hooper was playing Dobro in. To me, that's really unbelievable. And it's documented in the books. Keep on picking, Russ. Thank you.
How long has Russ been playing the dobro? Flipping.
Yeah, somebody asked me how long Russ has been playing the Dobro.
Just dump it over the front.
It's nice when it all works.
Russ has been playing Dobro since he had hair.
Dave Williams had something he wanted to share with you too.
Russ, I know you know that picture, what it is. And I've got a greeting that goes along with that picture. Hey Russ, I invited you here that night to test for the old man. You not only passed the test, you made Bill Monroe very happy. Congratulations for that, and for your lifetime of great work. Best regards, Tom Gray. That picture was taken in Tom Gray's basement. Tom, of course, was the bass player, along with John Duffy and Charlie Waller and Eddie Adcock, of the original Country Gentlemen, and later the founding bass player of the Seldom Scene. Best wishes from Tom.
Thank you. Thank you. Shaking his arm.
Let me continue on here. What can you say about a man who's admired, revered, and respected by all of his peers? I can start by saying that's not the man we're honoring tonight. Several months ago, I got a call from one of the members of the nominating committee, and that member shall remain nameless. And he was telling me about the selection process for our dishonoree tonight. It seems they were sitting around the table, batting around names. Didn't seem to stir much interest. And all of a sudden someone said, "How about Russ Hooper?" And he said it was just amazing. At that point, everybody in the room, their heads snapped up, and in unison they all said, "Who?" That was the only unanimous vote they had all night. And that's why we're here tonight. So, Mr. Hooper.
Yes, sir.
Was born in Washington, D.C. And at the age of 15, he moved to Baltimore, Maryland. And in doing that, Washington's loss became Baltimore's loss. Russ plays in a band called Bluestone. They have a catchy motto, "The more you drink, the better we sound." One night they were playing in a club up on Urban Avenue. I went up to see them. Went in, sat down, had a beer. They came out and played the first set. I finished my beer and walked back to the band room. And back in the back, Tommy Neal, the banjo player, and Russ were having a pretty good knockdown argument. So I walked back over there and said, "What's going on here?" Russ said, "Tommy turned one of my tuning pegs and he won't tell me which one." Just so you know, Hooper, I had to pay him a couple of bucks to fix it because the son of a bitch wouldn't tell me either. Now here's a question for you. What does a homicide investigation and Russ's Dobro have in common? Everybody's happy when the case is closed. You know, it takes a special kind of person to sit there with a smile on their face while your buddies are tossing lit firecrackers in your lap. And Russ, I just want to tell you, I know that you're smiling now, but later on when Janice explains all these jokes to you, you're going to be a little pissed. So I was standing out in the area there with the sofas, and Russ was in the vendor area, and he was playing, and I'm watching him, and he could see I was watching him, and he came walking out. He says, "Hey, Dave, did you hear my last song?" I told him, "I hope so." Later on, when these jokes are explained to you,
I'll talk to you.
Well, after all this, I guess it's time to fulfill a request I had to say something nice about Russ. And I thought there'd be no better way of doing that than letting you know just how generous a man he is. And I'll take you back to that night I was at the club on Urban Avenue. And it got to be the third set, and by then they actually were sounding better. At some point in the third set, Russ stepped up to the instrument mic And he ripped off a version of Ground Speed that would have brought a tear to Uncle Josh's eye. I mean, he just flat nailed it. And the audience recognized this, and they stood up and gave him a standing ovation. Even I stood up, but I was trying to signal the waitress. When I could tell Russ was touched by the response, he walked over to the vocal mic. He said, "Folks, that's the nicest round of applause I've ever received." He said, "And to show my appreciation, I'd like to buy you all a beer." So he turned to the bartender and said, "Shorty, give me 1 beer and 100 straws." All seriousness aside, I'd like to tell you that you can have no better friend than Russ Hooper. You'll never meet a nicer guy than Russ Hooper. We've known one another for almost 50 years, and I'm proud to call him my friend, and he deserves every accolade he's getting tonight. Thank you. Okay, I'm not meaning to hog the mic, but I have one more thing I have to read. Dear Russ, in the mid-60s, I was a recent college graduate with a guitar. Some of my friends were into the folk music of that time, but I had always liked the older, pure country and bluegrass sounds. I began to look for places to hear and learn about the music that fascinated me. One band I began to hear about was Marvin Howell and the Franklin County Boys. They sometimes were heard on local radio stations, and to my ears, they had a great sound, strong vocal harmonies, and solid instrumentation. I was anxious to see them in person, and when they announced their play dates, I found myself going to hear them. Of course, that is when I got to know you, the Dobro man in the band. You were always the consummate professional on stage, and you took time to be friendly off stage. Before too long, a position for bass player opened up, and I joined the band. We performed in a variety of fine establishments. Well, maybe some weren't so fine, but we had many good times and interesting experiences. I learned a lot during that time, and you were an important influence. As a result, I developed an interest which continued through the subsequent years, right up to the present day as I keep performing. Now we are working together again in Bluestone, and what fun it is. You are still a great stage performer, and while we might poke a little fun at you and your shiny instrument, and do I dare mention your shiny head, we all value your friendship and the contributions you make to the band. Congratulations as you receive these well-deserved honors. Yours truly, Carol Swain. Carol's the bass player with Bluestone.
Just to add a little note of truth to that. You see the guy on this side of the picture? David Williams. Larry.
Many of you know Dick Blattenberger up in Pennsylvania. He's the old Dobro man, and he couldn't be here tonight. He sent a letter to me to read to you, Russ. So I'm going to read. This is from Dick. Dear Russ, it gives me great pleasure to join others in honoring you on your big day, even though I cannot be there in person. It may be stated in the liner notes of an old LP back in the 60s that bluegrass has produced only a handful of really good Dobro players. And that was true at that time. And you were one of those handful, Russ. You were referred to as the one who ain't Josh. That's right up there in his league. What an honor. I first heard your recordings on 4 old Rebel LPs that didn't even have jackets, of really good bands who weren't exactly household names north of the Mason-Dixon line back then. But there was some awfully good Dobro playing on them, and I immediately proceeded to steal everything I could from them. I especially remember Rainbow and Dobro on the Ridge. About that time, I discovered Sunset Park and had the good fortune to meet this fantastic Dobro player in person who knocked my socks off. For some reason, he has always remembered me over the decades. He was great when I just discovered what a Dobro was. He was a super picker then and just as nice a guy as he was a musician. But the thing is, he still is. I'm so proud to call him my friend, and when I play those old recordings, it just doesn't get any better. Even today, his version of steel guitar chimes is unequaled. Russ can knock your socks off with hot licks, but being the total musician he is, the name of the game is taste, as it is with all the top Dobro players. Russ personifies this. We traditionalists know we are a dying breed. As much as I appreciate and admire the new, Russ and I, and a handful of others still want to keep the old sounds alive. I'd rather steal than switch. Besides, I'm not good enough or too lazy to change. And you are still the guy I want to steal from, Russ. Make it cry, son. Always your friend and admirer, Dick Blattenberg. I want to just say two quick things. First of all, personally, for me to read a letter from Dick Blattenberger to you, it's like the best honor I've ever had. So,
Thank you.
and one more thing, there was a fella up in the Baltimore area who was well known in the bluegrass community up there, and his name was Danny Curtis, and Danny was Russ's best friend for about 55 years or so, and Danny passed away about 5 years ago, and I thought it'd be nice to mention his name and just tell you, Russ, that I think if he were here, he'd be really, really proud of you. So,
He's here.
he's here. Yep.
Totally here. Not.
Thank you, Russ.
It's been my pleasure to know Russ for about 5 years, ever since met him down here, of course, here and down in Florida. And I'd like to tell you just one quick little story, and it's a story I read. I'm not really sure whether this is prophetic or not, but St. Peter was checking IDs, and he asked the man and said, you know, what did you do on earth? And he said, well, I was a doctor. I saved many lives, and I gave people better quality of life. St. Peter said, yes, you go right on in through those pearly gates. Next was a lady. She said, what did you do? He said, well, I was a school teacher, and I ministered and taught children and gave them the best education that I could. St. Peter said, you go right on in. Next fellow came up and said, St. Peter said, what did you do? He said, I was a dobro player. He said, you go around the side up the freight elevator through the kitchen. Russ, it's been my pleasure to know you. Have some wonderful conversations on the phone that sometimes I'm sure AT&T is glad to see the results of that. But as we come here to honor you tonight, it's been my honor and my pleasure to know you, and I have a couple of letters that I would like to read. I have been playing music for about 10 years with Russ. This is not me, of which the last 4 has been quite frequent. Russ is one of the most all-around good guys you will ever meet. He is also a very good musician. Russ gives 110% on every show. It seems he always knows what licks fit where to put them. He is a real joy to be on stage with and fits in with Bluestone. I sometimes will give him a rough time when he is taking a break in a song, and I'll say, get it, Dad, even though there are only a couple of years difference in our age. It's a real pleasure to know Russ Hooper, share the stage with him, and also call him friend. Congratulations, Russ, your friend, Dick Laird, and Dick Laird is the leader of Bluestone. And one more letter, and this one comes from the Villages, Florida. To a longtime friend, Russ Hooper. Dear Russ, congratulations on being honored at the 7th annual gathering of Resonators, RESOGAT 2011. It is disappointing that I can't be there in person in July. They don't allow golf carts on interstates. Instead, consider this letter my absentee handshake for an honor well deserved. Our friendship goes back to the 50s when we first called you Hank. Now that's something I didn't know, but now everybody knows that. How's that for memory for an 81-year-old young amateur mandolin player? Through the years, I've enjoyed your company at countless jam sessions in each other's homes in and around Baltimore. Your love of the really true American music is augmented by your willingness to share your expertise and time with others, and your ability to forgive others when such as when I neglected to return the embossed RH guitar pick you lent me back in 1960.
That's where it went.
Okay, feel free to bid on it when it is appraised on Antiques Roadshow. Your Florida friend, Tom Shaw, first mandolin, the Villages String Ensemble, the Villages, Florida. Again, just a personal thanks to Russ for all that you have meant to me, for sharing and getting a novice dobro player going, giving him encouragement and instruction, and just a lot of wonderful times together. Thank you, Russ.
Here we go.
I'm honored to be swaying here tonight. So you're surprised I'm still standing here at all, is you? We're here tonight to honor Mr. Russ Hooper. Who? Oh, Mr. Russ Hooper. Thank you for being here tonight. And you all could be home enjoying yourself. I called Russ my mentor one time, and he said, I prefer idle. Russ reminds me of an old uncle on a new drug and hadn't got the dosage figured out yet. You really don't see a lot of players like Russ. You know, it's kind of like seeing a Volvo with a gun rack in it. Russ really has been playing the dobro for a lot of years. I want you to look at what playing the dobro will do to you for 50 years. He started out right there. Anyway, I got some remarks from Russ's wife, Janice, and we're going to share it with you. 70 stuff we can't say, Janice. Russ said the first time he heard me play the dobro, he laughed so hard that the tears ran down his leg. Thank you for listening to me guitar. Where'd you get that shirt? It looks like a witch threw up on it. We got another one here from Russ. Is a great humanitarian. He's a great entertainer, and he's a great dobro. Hell, Russ, I can't read this stuff you wrote for me to say. Russ does have a great stage presence. You know, just look at him. Looks like the funny papers when the kids get through playing with it. I'm going to remember this evening for as long as it takes me to get to the truck. Russ, we'd like to thank you for taking time away from the home. He hadn't said much, but he has a great way with words. And the ability to make people feel comfortable. He really does. One time he told Billy Graham he liked his crackers. Russ is a great dobro player. At least he's told me that a lot of times. When you start doing stuff like this, you look for ammunition, you know, stuff you're gonna wear. So Janice gave us a couple of things. Oddly enough, Russ is afraid of escalators. He'd go upstairs all day long, ride the elevator up and down. He hates escalators. I said, Janice, what in the world? She said he fell on an escalator one time for almost 11 minutes. Sometimes when I'm over at Russ's house, and he's gone, you know, doing the TV stuff, and Janice and I just love to watch Russ on television. We really do. We just laugh and giggle. Sometimes we even turn the sound on. I ain't gonna tell you it's been a long evening, but when this thing started, I didn't need a shave. Russ and Janice met and went out on a blind date, and Russ was outdated and Janice must have been blind. They went out to this really romantic spot on the lake, and they parked, and Russ took off his shirt, and then he took off his trousers, and they were there till 2 o'clock in the morning. Janice is throwing the stick and Russ would go fetch it out of the water. Janice was really fond of showing off her pom-poms in school. She wasn't a cheerleader or anything. You ought to see his tax returns, man, under charitable contributions is nothing. Because at this age, you can't even give it away. Russ came up to a really hard time, and times were hard for musicians back then. In addition to these pictures, we have some other pictures. We have a picture of Russ and some other musicians sitting around in a circle, and times were hard. And they're all sharing the same cigarette. Russ told Janice this was going to be an exciting evening. One that she would remember forever. You told her the same thing on your wedding night, did you? All right, I'll put that. In all honesty, the letter says, I first met Russ Hooper. Who's? Russ Hooper in the middle 60s. My brother Dave and I used to live for what we called picking parties. We're a bunch of bluegrass pickers. We'd get together and our wives and girlfriends make them really miserable. They would all have to sit and listen to us play music for hours on end. I remember this one party where I first heard Russ play. In those days, Dobro players were pretty rare. I think Buck Graves and Kenny Haddock were the only guys I had ever actually seen play a Dobro. Do you know where this is going? There were a few guys making records with the big name recording artists, Brother Oswald, Shot Jackson, and a few more, but to hear one on a recording and see one being played live were two very different things. I had seen Buck with Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper in the early 50s at the Old Dominion Barn Dance in Richmond, Virginia, several times later on in the late 50s with Flatt and Scruggs after Buck became known as Josh Graves. I had seen Kenny with the Country Gentlemen playing at the Shamrock Club in the Georgetown section of Washington, D.C. So, in the early 1960s, I thought I was pretty much alone as a Dobro player in my area until I walked into that party and heard Russ play. I was shocked at how well he played. He was from up around Baltimore. They all whispered to me, no wonder I'd never heard of him. That was about 30 miles up the road. That little gunfighter, what's he doing down here in my world, I wondered. I'll never forget when he played one of the prettiest instrumentals I'd ever heard. I asked him what the name of the song was, and he told me that it was called It's All Over, It's Over. This was in the days before any of us could afford a tape recorder, but I remembered what he played, and a few years later when I was recording my first solo album, I included It's Over. After we became friends years later, he never let me forget where I had first heard that song. We've both pretty much hung up our guns now, or at least have unloaded them. But I'll always be grateful for that song and for the fact that he lived way up in Baltimore. Congratulations, Russ, on surviving so many years of playing music, and my best wishes for many more years of playing, and it is signed, Mike Aldridge. let's move on. We got something else. Do you need any rebuttal or? No, we don't. We do have time for one other thing, though. I can't take it off.
Russ, as you come here this evening, we have something we hope that will remind you of this evening.
Oh, I won't forget.
You won't forget. This plaque says, "In honor and recognition for his contributions to the world of bluegrass music, a true pioneer of the dobro who will always stand as a groundbreaking master of the instrument, an inspiration to many and a friend to all, a musician who made a difference. Thank you, Russ Hooper."
This is going to be a hard act to follow, but I got a feeling I'm going to have flashbacks for about 3 months. I want to thank all of you on the committee and everybody that was involved in doing this fiasco. I'll never forget this, and you know I'm going to try hard. I want to thank JP and all the guys, Larry and Don and Dave and all of them that was involved in this thing. It's been a pleasure. It's been a nice ride all this time. And I just hope I can live up all the BS that was told about me. Thank all of you. Thank you very much.